Okay, James, state your name, you represent, close it out.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I want to thank you for taking up this charge today. I think it's very important from the perspective of fiscal responsibility and rule of law. A few months ago, my senior staff team approached me and asked me to investigate this particular issue, and I thought, well, this ought to be pretty simple and straightforward. What I didn't realize at the time is that there's an entire ecosystem that's been built up as a result of the introduction of pandemic relief, largely. And so what should have been a 2 to 3 page paper looking at guaranteed income programs in Texas ended up turning into this 20-page monster, which I apologize for dumping on your desk. But very quickly, what I want to do is go through this paper and talk just a little bit about what's in it.
TPPF.
Now, I apologize, it's only in draft form.
Oh, I see, okay, no, we were looking for such dump, okay? And Brian's well-researched paper, okay? I expect nonetheless from somebody, but I met at the American Legislative Exchange Council program, but James, you're local, so you get to talk about a dump, and then I assume you're gonna give it to us later.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
So this will be published later this month. But what it does is it looks at the philosophy, the players, and the problems surrounding guaranteed income programs. And again, very quickly, just going through it, one of the first observations is that these are cash transfer programs are established on a very troubling philosophical foundation of collectivism and social justice. And if you look at some of the key players, they readily admit to it. Stanford's Basic Income Lab says that an unconditional cash grant has the potential to foster a more equitable society by addressing persistent poverty, growing inequalities, and racial and gender injustices. It also, this philosophy has given rise to more than 200 programs that we've been able to track nationwide. And then finally, what it looks like is that this philosophy is being applied particularly down at the local level, which I think is highly relevant for this committee. Again, Stanford Basic Income Lab says that local government is uniquely positioned to pioneer innovative and practical solutions to challenges like economic security, mobility, poverty, and inequality that often seem intractable at the state and federal level. So they are openly admitting that they are pursuing their philosophical aims at the local level. And I think that's very much evidenced when you look at some of Texas's most progressive cities and counties. They're very clearly of the same ideological ilk, and they're applying that philosophy and policy. Now, one of the other observations that I have is this is still a developing field, and because it's a developing field, it's given rise to a lot of variation in program type. But when you look at the programs that have been applied, particularly here in the U.S., you see 4 general types. It's the conditional cash transfer, the unconditional cash transfer, universal basic income, and guaranteed income programs. Now, Texas cities and counties seem to have a particular preference for guaranteed income programs. You may be asking, what's the difference between UBI and guaranteed income? UBI is generally applicable to everyone. Guaranteed income tends to be a bit more selective or limited in the participant types, and guaranteed income programs are usually targeted at households as opposed to individuals, which UBI usually targets. Moving on very quickly, progressives, it's very clear that progressives have built an impressive infrastructure with which to advance this policy goal. And I cite to at least half a dozen different institutions, ranging from higher ed institutions to nonprofit associations, private groups. There is a constellation of different organizations, all with a very similar goal. And it's very interesting how they work together. You see that institutions of higher education tend to conduct the research and data analysis portion. Nonprofits are tending to help with program design and implementation as well as data collection. And you have advocacy associations whipping up political support, providing messaging and public relations, and even identifying specific stakeholders in communities where these programs are taking place and selecting individuals so that they can choose their stories to tell publicly. and try to advance the message that way. Moving on, one of the other things that became obvious is that all of this is, again, being brought to bear. I'll go through a number of different political subdivisions in Texas which have applied the program locally. Those include Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, and Harris County. I give a special mention to Dallas because it looks like they were on the trajectory toward moving toward the implementation of a publicly supported guaranteed income program, but they stopped just short. One thing that strikes me about all of these programs is they appear to start with either private seed money or federal pandemic aid, and then over time shift to locally supported monies. And I think this is part of the tinkering process that's going on with these types of programs right now. You're seeing progressives attempt different variations to try and find out which programs work. Moving on from that and wrapping up very shortly, I think there is a spate of new research that has either been performed or is on the horizon that provides empirical evidence demonstrating the ineffectiveness and the harm of these types of programs. And two, real quickly, that I'll cite to, were conducted by the Economic Bureau, National Bureau of Economic Research, which published two reports in August 2024, one on labor, the other on income, both of which those reports showed that there may have been some short-term benefit to manifest, but over the long term, everything peters out. And at the end of the day, a lot of these people tend to end up in worse position. So what do we do with all of this? I think there are obvious constitutional concerns. I'm not persuaded that any of these programs serve a legitimate public purpose. But even if the courts decide otherwise, I hope the legislature will consider at least three things, one of which is amending the Texas Constitution to strengthen the gift clause prohibitions. It's very clear that if there is this much uncertainty in the policy arena, then we should go back into the Texas Constitution and make it crystal clear that political subdivisions should not be doing that. Falling short of that, I hope the legislature will move forward with some sort of statutory change that with unmistakable clarity makes it clear cities and counties can't do that. Lastly, I think we need more transparency on all of this, not just guaranteed income programs, but federal funding as a whole. As a model, the body might consider mimicking the LBB's top 100 federal funding sources in the Texas state budget model. Let's do a variation of that for local governments and do the top 100 federal funding recipients and uses among political subdivisions. Let's start shining a light on how federal money is flowing down to local sources and who the biggest spenders are. Thank you for your time.